in this week's parsha, the story about Korach. And we went into some interesting, fascinating ideas within the parsha, particularly about the rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu, that Korach, rebelled against Moses and everything that happened along the way, which was interesting and fascinating little story. And what's interesting to me, what stands out a little bit is we see that although Korach had his rebellion against Moshe, ultimately Moshe was vindicated. Moshe was victorious, whereas Korach, sadly met his demise there. And there's an interesting thing I once heard. If you come to a community and all you see is they have a Jewish cemetery there, what does it tell you? That this neighborhood once had a Jewish community there, right? If you see a shul, then what does it tell you? This community still has currently a Jewish community there. If you arrive in a community and you see that they have a school, a cheder, a yeshiva, what does that tell you? That there will be a Jewish community in the future as well. And so when I think about that, and I think about what's going on in this particular instance, we think, unfortunately these days, I'm finding myself in the cemetery very often. And that's a little bit sad that we see the past. But what gives me hope in our community and being here with each of you and studying each day is that our community is not only about a past, but we have a very bright future ahead as well. Not only because we have our shuls, which represents the present, but also because we have wonderful schools and we have a young community here and we have a whole bright future ahead of us as well. And to me, that's important, and that's very hopeful to see that we have that, because I think it's significant that we could look ahead and see that we've got a future community here. And please God, the community will be strong and healthy and well for many years to come. It's important to us. And what we need to do is just to nurture the community. Remember that when God offered the Torah to the Jewish people, and we offered all sorts of guarantors. We said our patriarchs, our matriarchs, the Babas, the Zaydas, this, that, the... God didn't accept until we said our children will be the guarantors for the future. And that, I think, is important. Our children certainly are the guarantors of our future. The thing is, in today's world, everything is just fast, right? The click of the button, we have access to more information than our grandparents could have ever dreamed of. Or we can pick up the phone, we can speak to friends and relatives across the world in real time. And I think that the past year, since COVID came around, we've gotten a little bit more technologically savvy than we previously were. We talked yesterday about this concept of Zoom, of having that passion, the enthusiasm, the diligence, the involvement, the fast speed. And I think today we've got a lot of that, right? In an instant, we send messages, photos, emojis halfway across the globe. These days, I attend a class that goes on from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. New York time, twice a week. So on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, I'm up from 1 to 5 a.m. our time. If I didn't catch a little bit of red eye before that, then I am in trouble for the day. That's fine. I just drink a lot of coffee. You can hear my voice is a little bit hoarser. I guess that's from the lack of sleep that's going on. But it's just phenomenal. I could be participating in class which is taking place in New York, and I'm sitting in the class right here. And likewise, right here, we are giving the class, and we have participants in Jerusalem and Jakarta, and we have participants in Australia and America. It's just incredible. And of course, this class is being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, so people can watch this anytime or watching it right now in real time, not only on our Zoom. But there was a time when things took time, right? When it took days, weeks, or months for a message to reach its recipient. Remember those good old days of snail mail? Or perhaps the times of, what was that called, where you sent the message across the world? It was before my times. Come on, what is it called again? Telegram, right? The Telegram. Today there's a different thing. We have telegrams, we have an app called Telegram. So the world is changing, and now even what we thought was quick a year ago is considered so slow today. What's interesting is how quick people expect responses and all that, right? So today I want to talk about one particular speedy phenomenon, which we discussed a little bit yesterday, and to just extend and expound on that a little bit more today. For those who weren't here in the shir yesterday, and even for those who were, we're going to expound further on that. Long before the development of modern technology, we're talking about, what did we discuss yesterday? The almond tree, right? So let's just quickly recap what's going on in the parsha at the moment. We discussed yesterday how Korach, who was a cousin of Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, and like them, he came from the tribe of Levi. We'll go, if we discuss the lineage a little bit, right? His father was Yitzhar, and Yitzhar's brother was Amram. Amram was the father of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Both of them were the sons of Kahas. So really, they were very close relatives to Moshe here. Because if his father was Yitzhar, the brother of Amram, that means they're first cousins. And this was Korach's rebellion. Why do you deserve the leadership? What about me? Okay? He says, my father was one of 4 brothers. There was Amram, there was Yitzhar, Chevron, and Uziel. If you look in the parsha, you have the details. Amram, who was the firstborn, he merited to see his sons. Moshe became the leader, the king of the Jewish people at the time. Aaron was anointed to be the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. He got the big kahuna. And what about me? He says. What am I? Chopped liver, chopped herring. He felt that he also deserved a position of leadership since he's in the same family. Good question. Yeah. So why doesn't he get the position of leadership, unlike his cousins who have the position? He also wanted it. That was his complaint. It just didn't sit well with him why he didn't have it. And that's what he did. He rallied the 250 prestigious men, the leaders. He stirred them into this demonstration, into this toy, into protesting. Why should Moshe and Aaron have all the glory for themselves? What about us? Are we not all the sons of God? And what makes you think that you're more deserving, more entitled? Yeah, that's a major theme these days. I was watching, if you ever have time and want to watch somebody interesting, a young guy, watch videos of Simon Sinek. I watched some of his videos online until he started talking about the addiction of watching of our phones. Then I was like, okay, maybe I'm addicted. But he talks about the idea of the millennials. I don't know if I fit into the millennials. I think I'm born before the millennial era. But whatever the case is, he talks about a lot of entitlement going on these days. That's what Korach was, entitlement. Why are we not entitled to this leadership? Why just you, Moshe and Aaron? Now, of course, we know that it wasn't Moshe who chose this position. In fact, Moshe was very humble. He didn't want this position. It was God who put him in this position. And that's what he said to them, in fact. If you look in the parsha, Moshe says to them, I did not seek this position of honor. And my brother Aaron didn't do it either. It was the will of God. God put us into this position. It was God's choice. And I'm doing the will of, you think I need the gray hair? You think I need all the stress and all the trouble that comes with this? So seeing that the people weren't willing to accept his answer, he tries negotiating with them. He tries to reckon with them. He tries all types of tactics. And as we discussed many times before, unfortunately, in our history, worse than external anti-Semitism. We know there's Hamas. We know of the Nazis, Yamach Shemam. External anti-Semitism is identifiable, and we could deal with it in its way. But worse than that, we've had internal strife. That's what Korach was. Korach was a rebel rouser from within. And what was he to do? So we discussed yesterday that they had their showdown with the pans of the ketoras, the incense, and God decided who wins. Of course, the ground opened up and Korach and his men were swallowed. They were consumed by the ground, and Moshe was declared that he indeed was the one who was fit to be the leader of the Jewish people, as God had chosen. Now, we went on from there to talk about the next incident that happened, where more people continued their kvetching and complaining. And again, God performs this amazing miracle, which we discussed yesterday. The idea where each tribe submitted a stick, and Aaron's all of a sudden, just like that, blossomed very quickly overnight and grew almonds. And we asked, why almonds, right? Aren't there other more beautiful fruit that perhaps are more impressive, more expensive, maybe juicier than small almonds, which God could have used to express that's the uniqueness about Aaron, and which we discussed yesterday about the tribe of Levi. So we wonder, no, so it's almonds, right? And if it would have been, I don't know, pineapples, we were going to ask, of course, why pineapples? Why not pears? What difference does it make? The main thing is that Aaron's staff grew fruit and the others didn't. But of course, every word and every detail of the Torah, as we all know, is exact. It's precise. Nothing is insignificant. Nothing is superfluous or redundant. So what's the meaning of the almonds growing on on Aaron HaKohen's staff? And the answer, or there are several answers, but one that we discussed from the commentaries is that almonds symbolize on the one hand, it talks about, Rashi mentions the swift punishment for those who challenge the kahuna, right? Korach and his group challenged the priesthood, the qualifications of Aaron, and their punishment was frighteningly swift. So it didn't come a year or a decade later. It was instant. God made it clear who and what the priesthood was. So that's one answer that Rashi offers, that this speed of the almonds growing so quick that they blossomed so fast, that expressed the idea that the speed, the Hebrew word for almonds is, anyone know? Shkedim, right? And that comes from the word shaked, which means quick. So the idea that it was very quick. But we discussed yesterday that there's another significance to the speed, to the alacrity that was represented by the almonds. And that was the idea that the Kohanim, and in that sense, by extension, each and every one of us, you and I included, have to implement and inculcate that idea that we need that enthusiasm, that passion, that speed. So that was yesterday's sheer discussion. So today I want to continue on that theme a little bit. I didn't have too much time to prepare much more, but sometimes review is a good thing. I remember once taking a course with Kievman, and he's a presenter par excellence, a world-renowned figure in these things. And he mentioned in that presentation, when you're giving a talk, you have to tell the people what you're going to say. Then you have to tell it to them, and then you have to tell them what you said. So now I'm telling you what we said. And then we'll try to develop the ideas a little bit further and learn some more lessons. But I think that's certainly a important thing. Leonie, you want to ask a question? I see you keep unmuting.
Yeah, please, before, if I can ask this question, it's been worrying me.
Yeah, sure.
Jealousy, which causes terrible other emotions, but it's a terribly powerful feeling. And that, so I actually feel sorry for Korah in a way. He couldn't, I don't think he could control this jealousy. It was just building on and on and on. And I'm asking, how does one get rid of that feeling? What could he have done? His wife was supporting that feeling. She was making it grow. What could he have done otherwise?
Right. It's a very good question you're asking, Leonie. And indeed, it's an emotion, it's a feeling. Now, in general, I don't think it's easy for a person to control their emotions, their feelings. It's difficult to do so. So you have a very valid point. And in fact, it says in the works of Kabbalah that only really tzaddikim, the truly righteous people, are able to control their emotions. However, when you study Hasidus, it does tell us that we can implement, not easily, but with work, we can implement this concept called moach shalit al halev, that our mind should control our emotions, our instincts. That means if we think about something, just as we have the 10 faculties of our soul that we've been discussing in our shiur, right? We have our 3 intellectual faculties, which is Chachma, Bina, Dat, or wisdom, knowledge, understanding. And then there are the 10 emotions of our soul, our emotional faculties, which is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus, which we've discussed previously at greater length. But the idea then is that there's the garments of the soul. The garments of the soul are more specifically our thought, speech, and deed. So even if we can't really control our feelings, and it's hard to do so, no doubt, but we certainly can try to use our mind, our moach, to control, to do what we can to prevent it. And in fact, in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, that we used to study sometimes, it tells us who is truly happy. Ezehu Asher, who is rich, Hasamech Bechelko, the one who's happy with their lot. So that's really what we should be doing, is focusing on, thank God I have this, thank God, count my blessings in life, because thank God we all have lots of blessings to be grateful for. And indeed, Korach perhaps had some valid points in his complaint, in his quest for leadership. Why are you any better? But I think I want to take this point a little bit in another direction. We talked about the idea that the almonds grew very quickly. And on the one hand, we said it talks about the idea that the punishment was swift for questioning God's appointment of Aaron and Moshe in this position of leadership. And at the same time, we also talked about the idea, the significance of applying speed, alacrity, zeal, excitement, passion, enthusiasm in our lives. But I want to take a step away from that discussion for a moment. And I want to go into another area, and perhaps this will answer your question, Leonie, about why not to have jealousy in life. And it's not easy, because oftentimes we see someone else as prosperous and successful, we envy them. Now, on the one hand, it's a good quality perhaps to try to emulate those who are successful and say to myself, what could I learn from them? How could I apply whatever that person does? And in fact, there is a positive quality of jealousy. In fact, our sages tell us that when it comes to matters of spirituality, we should be envious of others. We should be inspired to be like those who are more prosperous and successful, spiritually speaking. But when it comes to material matters, then we shouldn't be jealous of others, right? The thing is that, let's talk for a moment, when it comes to, financial success, right? I think firstly, there's a big difference.
He was jealous of the spiritual.
That's the positive side, and that's a good thing. But maybe he went about it in the wrong way. That's true. And our sages, especially the Hasidic sages, commentators, they particularly highlight that. That is something to look up to, that the jealousy was of a spiritual nature, and that's a good thing. But it wasn't just the spiritual side. It was also about the yichus that comes with it. For those watching abroad, yichus is a South African slang word. I know it's Hebrew, but here particularly we refer to that the prestige. That's what we mean by yichus here. Literally, yichus means more genealogy, or right, one's lineage, but they came from the same lineage. We're talking about the prestige that came with it. It wasn't only the spiritual side. That was the good part of it, but there was also the other aspect. And maybe that's why God performed this miracle that the almonds grew so quickly, because there's a very deep and meaningful lesson that we can learn from the almonds, and I think that's relevant, which we discussed at greater detail yesterday. But let's just take, for example, okay, let's think about something we all need to earn a living, right? And whether we like it or not, jobs are an essential part of our life. If you're lucky to be retired at this stage, hopefully you have enough funds with which to be retired on. But without ordinary people getting up in the morning and going to work and doing what they have to do, then we wouldn't have all of what we see around us. We just wouldn't have. I tell you, for our weekly programs here at Chabad House, it doesn't just happen. It's not just magical. It doesn't just happen like without anything. Thank God there are people right here in this group and beyond who fund us, right? Who are giving donations. And with those donations, we're able to send out our food parcels, and we're able to provide the activities. And I'm able to get whatever salary I'm able to get, because there are people who go to work and do good things with their money and are able to fund and support the activities that we do. And for generations, it's not a new thing. right? Parents have tried to instill in their children that you need to succeed in school. You need to have a strong work ethic. You need to be able to respect those who are superior to us. We have to understand that if we secure ourselves a good job, then we can have a good life, etc., etc. Even though that's not so simple either, because a lot of people don't understand how finances work and get themselves up into deep debts and all the other issues that come with it. Okay, I'm not qualified to give a good course on financial matters, but what does the Torah say about this? That I could share with you, right? Should we really be investing so much of our time, so much of our energy and resources on trying to succeed in our careers? Maybe we should just spend our days in shul. Maybe we should be sitting and studying Torah all day. You have a wonderful device here on Zoom. You could be sitting at learning shiurim 24 hours a day. Go into ChabadSouthAfrica.org. There's many other wonderful websites out there. You could be studying, learning Torah day and night, right? And don't worry, God will provide. You know the good old joke they say about this young lady who's dating a guy and asks her father, please tell me, what do you think about my prospective husband? Is he good for me to marry? So the future father-in-law decides to interview the young man, asks him, says, you know, we're a wealthy family. How do you plan to provide for my daughter? She has high expectations. So, well, God will provide. He said, what are you going to do for a living? God will provide. And what about holidays? You know, we go on vacation a couple of times a year as our wealthy family. God will provide. Everything God will provide. So the father-in-law comes out of the room and his wife asks, so what do you think of this guy? Is he good? He says, yeah, he's a good guy. He already understands. He already thinks I'm God. But we have to understand in life, is it just relying on God or do we do something about it, right? So the thing is that the Torah itself tells us this. First of all, the Torah contains many laws about business and money and all these dilemmas that we have in that matter. And of course, if the Torah discusses this, then obviously the Torah is suggesting, recommending that earning money and protecting the financial and moral ethics, etc., is necessary. And the Torah tells us how to go about it, which is obviously the Torah certainly endorses earning a living. And the Torah tells us that we have to make a concerted effort to take care of ourselves and our families and do what we need, right? The Torah itself says, we're going to read it in a couple of weeks' time, that we shouldn't be troubled when you send him free from you. Let me just quickly find the verse inside here. It's in Devarim. What is it? Let me just find it here. The verse says, God will bless you. And what does it mean, God will bless you? God will bless you in all that you do, says that God will bless you. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay. What does it mean Hashem will bless you? Hashem, right? The verse says, God will bless you in everything that you do. So clearly, the Torah tells us that in order to receive a blessing, which the commentators tell us, that you can't just sit idly. What does it mean God will bless you? All that you do, you have to create the conduit, the receptacle for the blessing in your life. Yes, God will bless you, but you create the receptacle to receive that blessing. When will God bless you? When you do. Yes, we should, of course, set aside time for spiritual pursuits, to study Torah and prayer, but we can't just rely on the miracles. What does it say in Pirkei Avos? What does Rabbi Gamliel tell us? If you have your Pirkei Avos, it's chapter 2, Mishnah 2. Just reading this Mishnah quickly, he says, Yafa Talmud Torah in Derech Eretz, that beautiful is the study of Torah with Derech Eretz, with the way of the world. Sheyigia Shnei Mishkachas. By the toil of both of them, we can avoid sin. V'chol Torah she'eni mamalacha. And ultimately, all Torah study that is not accompanied by work. If a person just studies Torah all day, you know what it says in Pirkei Avos? Sofa betela v'gereres avan. That will be, it's destined to end and cause a person to sin. You can't just live a completely spiritual life. It doesn't work. And the ethics of our fathers, the important tools for life that we have, tells us very clearly the importance of going to work. And the Gemara talks about this. It's very important that a person has to earn a living. And in fact, the Gemara asks this very question. We know it says in the Talmud that it's predetermined in Rosh Hashanah what type of, what income you're going to make for the year. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, then what do we have to work for? God decided already on Rosh Hashanah what kind of earning, what kind of sorry, just looking at a message or getting from one of the seniors. A few people saying they're struggling to connect. Not sure why. Just a second. Let me just respond to this. Sorry, guys. Okay, so if God is going to provide for all of our needs, and it says in the Talmud that in Rosh Hashanah God decides what we're going to earn for the whole year, then what do we need to go to work for? Right? Think about this for a moment. Before we even try to figure out how we plan to make a profit in our daily work, right? Today, tomorrow, this month, the quarter, whatever it is. The Talmud tells us that our profits have already been determined for us during Rosh Hashanah, the high holidays. So if that's the case, why bother going to work at all? Didn't God already decide how much we're going to make? And this is an matter that's discussed in the Gemara. The Gemara says, if God decided this, then what's the point of going to work? And I want to share with you what the Rabbi said about this. Generally speaking, is that it's true that, yes, if our sustenance has already been determined during the high holidays, it might not make sense. What do we need to, not only is it about the work, why do we have to work, but you could say, why do I even need to pray 3 times a day if it's already been decided and settled above, right? The thing is, don't quit your job just yet if you're working. or don't stop praying today either, God forbid, right? There's an answer to this question that's explained not only in the Talmud, but it's elucidated in Chassidus. We have to understand the process by which the divine blessings, all blessings, right, such as whatever God decides we're going to earn, which is decided in Rosh Hashanah, as the Gemara says, how does that come to fruition? How does it materialize really in our lives? And we have to remember that we're talking about a bridge between 2 entirely different worlds. Right? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are a deeply spiritual time. We sit in shul, we're working on self-refinement, we're working on our souls, on forging a deeper connection with Hashem, on our interpersonal relationships, right? And of course, during this time of the year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, God determines and pledges blessings for the coming year. So how is it that this lofty spiritual blessing turns into our rands and cents, into the food that we need and the shelter and the clothing, all the things, the gadgets, you name it, that we need for the coming year? And the answer is that actually there is an evolutionary process from spiritual to material, which I touched on yesterday, but it's worthwhile to just expound a little bit on it today. Now we have to understand that, yes, humans as material entities, we are Homo sapiens and we have physical needs, right? We need our health and we need sustenance and we need our emotional well-being and we need good relationships and we need success in whatever we do in school and business, especially if you're trying to provide for your family. And yes, some of us while working are in school too. I actually take classes a few times a week just so I can be a little bit better at what I do. So like everything in this world, all these things that don't just happen, that don't just appear, right? Yes, we work in it in the physical sense, but the Talmud is telling us there's a spiritual source up above for everything that happens in our lives. So for that spiritual reality to transform into the material welfare that we need, there's a transition from the spiritual to the physical that has to take place. And it's not always quick and easy. Chassidus explains that sometimes along the way in the channels, there could be certain matters and reasons why the blessings could get stuck along the way and not reach us. You see, on Rosh Hashanah, we earn a certain amount of kindness that God pledges for us for the coming year. But that kindness is a spiritual currency. It's not necessarily rands and cents or any other physical form. So what happens in order for that spiritual kindness that God has bestowed upon us, that God has pledged for us to materialize in our life for the coming year? We pray. And we pray every day. Because each day there's a determination of what form of predetermined blessings will come into our life. Yes, God pledged the blessings, but now that blessing has to actually materialize. It actually has to become part of our life. We want God to bless us tangibly, to fulfill our needs in the simplest, clearest way in our lives. So although God determined the blessings, we don't want those blessings to get clogged up for whatever reason. So we pray and we work on our connection with God. We want to keep those channels, we want to prevent them from getting clogged. We want to make sure that they come from the spiritual into the physical without any interruptions. And that's exactly why we have to work on ourselves. The Torah tells us to. Yes, it's true. Our livelihood, that what we do for a living, how much we're going to earn in the year, yes, it's predetermined. God decided in Rosh Hashanah. But how does that practically materialize in our life? God tells us, you have to do something. In order for God's blessing to materialize in the physical, from the spiritual to the physical, you have to do something about it. That's exactly what it is. We have to take those blessings from the spiritual and bring them into the physical world. That is part of the reason why we continue to pray each and every day, to ensure that it doesn't get clogged along the way. And that is exactly why we do something to work to earn a living. We have to create the receptacle for the blessing in our life. Yes, Leonie? You have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, you're answering me quite a lot, and I'm trying to digest it all. It's just I happen to have an occasion now where my great-grandson is showing a lot of jealousy because his grandmother there in Israel used to take a lot of notice of him, and now she's got 2 other siblings. And I'm not quite sure how to handle it. And that just made me sensitive to the fact that Korah was just so jealous, so eaten up with jealousy, and what should he have done about it? But I think you've answered me. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
I mean, look, along the way, we know there's a difference between kids and adults. And I'm reminded of a profound insight from the Tzemach Tzedek that we could all, I think, take a good lesson from. The Tzemach Tzedek talks about the difference between kids and adults when it comes to these types of matters of jealousy and reconciliation. And the idea that he says, and some of you may have heard this before, but the gist of it is, you look at kids, they get into a fight with each other, maybe jealous of one another, but ultimately they work things out and they'll be happy to play again and just get on with life. Us adults, when it comes to our jealousy and envy and faribbles, and we get into these little tits, what happens? I don't know. We tend to go into Cold War, ignoring one another, not seeing eye to eye, and all the faribbles and problems ensue. And it's a very sad reality about how many adults get into fights about matters and it never gets resolved. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, very interesting. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel. He also, I think, as the Rebbe, they had a lot in common. He was the Rebbe's great-grandfather. Their wives both had same names, so the Rebbe is named after him, and his wife was Chaya Mushka, just as the Rebbe's wife was, and she was also a great-granddaughter of his. The Rebbe married his cousin. They were relatives, and they both, I think, were probably the most influential of Chabad Rebbes. Lived the longest lives. The Rebbe lived into his 90s, as well as the Tzemach Tzedek. Very interesting similarities. Said the Tzemach Tzedek. I also find his teachings to be very realistic and pragmatic. He says, Very simple difference. Children want to be happy, and that's why they work things out and everything gets sorted and they're happy to play again together, despite the jealousy and the envy and the tiffs and whatever it might be. Whereas adults, unfortunately, sometimes we want to be right. You have a choice in life. You want to be right and miserable, or do you want to accept that I'm not always right and I can be happy? Let's learn from the kids, because as much as you see the jealousy in the kids, they move on and they show happiness. Korach didn't want to be happy. He wanted to be right. He wanted to prove himself. And perhaps tomorrow we could focus on some of the other aspects and elements of his complaints. For example, he talked about the tzitzis, he says, or a house that's full of Torah scrolls that still need a mezuzah. All the various complaints that Korach presented, which demonstrated his determination to be right. And if you want to be right always, unfortunately, we're not necessarily going to be happy. Like I once heard a woman say, I know I married Mr. Right. I just didn't realize his first name was Always. But here, if you look at the image that we put here, and there's a reason for this, because I was reading a good metaphor, a good way to explain how God's spiritual blessings, they have to go through this long process in order to become tangible, right? In order for them to materialize in the natural physical form in our lives. In order for that to happen, yes, we have to pray, but we also have to work the rules of nature. We have to work within the world that God created, within nature, in order for those blessings to come into our world, in order for them to take that real physical form that we need them to. So if you think about a electric light bulb, right? We have right here globes. We all have light bulbs in our rooms. So think about the light bulb for a moment, right? There's an electric current flowing through, right, in order for that light to work. In order for the light to work, that electric current has to pass through the various wires and circuits for them to reach the globe. Now that globe, or light bulb as we called it in the USA, it's converting that abstract electricity, that electric energy, into the light that we're able to make usage of. And the same applies to any electrical powers that we have. What's happening is that current has to come through in order for the electric to work. And in the same thing, we could say the spiritual blessings that God gives us in the high holidays, God determines for every human being in the world, because Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of all of creation. In order for those blessings, from Rosh Hashanah to come into our lives, that energy, it has to go through a process. If you want it to be converted into the things that we need, you need money. Oh, God determined you're going to get money, but you want that money to come into your life, you're going to have to do something physical. Yeah, you have to go to work. You have to do something for that blessing to convert into money. You want chocolate, you need rain, whatever you need. It needs to go through a process. Like the electric current comes through to the light bulb, or to charge our phone, or to whatever it is that we need to work. So the same thing, we have to work properly on wiring ourselves, right? We have to work on properly wiring the connection so that the blessings come from the spiritual source into the physical in our lives, in order for the blessings to come into our lives. And so this is the idea of how the process of the blessings come into our lives. And to connect it with what we were discussing yesterday, we said that in order for those divine blessings to convert into things like money and food and to come into reality, but there's another faster way that the divine blessings could flow from the spiritual source directly into our physical lives here, without any delay, without getting clogged up in the channels. And that is the blessings of the Kohanim that we discussed, that the Kohanim have that ability to bless, right? In Israel, it takes place every day, in Jerusalem at least. Outside of Israel, it is done only on the festivals. I think in Israel, outside of Jerusalem, it's only on Shabbos. Whatever the case, we discussed that in a previous year, the significance of the Birchas Kohanim. It was in fact in the Parsha just 2 weeks ago. Right? We read of the Birchas, the blessing, the priestly blessing. Many of us give the blessing to our children. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, that God should bless you, v'yishmerecha, and watch over you, protect you. Yara Hashem panav elecha v'choneka, that Hashem should cause His countenance to shine upon you, v'choneka, and God should favor you. Yisa Hashem panav elecha, the yasem l'chashalim, that God should raise His Yisa Hashem panav, His countenance upon you. The yasem l'chashalim, grant you peace. And we conclude with the words v'samla shemiah b'nei Yisrael, that God should, they should place, it's God's words, my name, the name on children of Israel, v'ani avarachem, so that I will bless them. So this is a blessing that is the priestly blessing. And we discussed a few weeks ago, in fact, if you go back to the Shir in Parshas Naso 3 weeks ago, where we talked about if it's a priestly blessing, how could we give it? We discussed the idea is that it's actually a blessing everybody can give. As we said yesterday, the blessings of the Kohanim, that speed, that alacrity, that diligence, the passion, enthusiasm, is something we can all learn from them, right? But isn't every blessing from God? So why is this blessing unique, right? Why are the Kohanim the ones who are uniquely qualified to bless us? And so just to bring the ideas together, I wanted to share with you a profound idea that I learned. Chassidus teaches us that the Kohanim, as we discussed yesterday, they have a special quality in their blessings that actually, because of their ability to bless, and because they are kindly people, that their blessings that they give have a way of flowing from heaven to earth, bypassing the whole process. They prevent the spiritual clogging in the spiritual pipeline, call it. And so the blessings of the Kohanim have that advantage, which we said yesterday, Kohanim are zrizim. They have that element of speed in them, as was proved by Aaron's staff quickly blossoming and growing almonds. And so the blessing of the Kohanim is able to benefit us without any possible blockages or delays that might otherwise happen in the journey from the spiritual realm into the physical. And I think that's an important aspect to keep in mind, that the blessings of the Kohanim. What was the word? There was a word I wanted to share with you. Anyways, let me share with you something that Chassidus tells us. It says the very word Aaron, actually, incidentally, that's my name, right? But it's comprised of the letters Nir'eh. What does Nir'eh mean? To appear, to see. So it's fascinating. I should have put this into the slide, how the word Aharon spells the word Nir'eh. It's the same letters. And that means that all the blessings that come from Aaron, the high priest, are able to be apparent, revealed in this world through the priestly blessing. Very interesting. So yes, we might have, what's the delivery services here? We have FedEx and DHL and whatever other delivery services we have in this country that offer quick deliveries. Forget about the South African Postal Service. That doesn't work very well. But we have to know that it's not only the Postal Service or other means of delivery, that the Kohen's blessing is a quicker delivery. That's why it says the very word Aharon, which is the name of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, spells the word Nir'eh, that you could see the blessing in your life. The question, of course, is, why does the priestly blessing come so quickly? Right? Why is it not subject to the normal process of the way we discussed the evolution from the spiritual to the physical? And that, we said, has to do with the source of the blessing. Unlike a standard blessing, the Birchas Kohanim, the blessings that come from the priests, we said is rooted in a very deep place, far above the regular Seder HaIshtalshelus, the standard order of transmission from heaven to earth. The Birchas Kohanim, the blessings that the priests give, it outranks the whole system. Not only the rules of nature, but also the rules of creation. And so it's not subject to the limits of the system. it could flow from the highest spiritual heights right into your bank account, right into your kitchen table, right to wherever you need it. When a blessing flows from a lofty level within the normal order of nature, Seder Ishtalshelus, it's called, then it's subject to the process of nature, right? So, of course, there are many disruptions along the way. It's just, that's life. There are things that clog up the channels. In my own home, we're dealing with a big tree that keeps on clogging. For the past 7 years, I'm getting these every 2-3 months. I have to call a plumber, and the landlord says it's my problem because my kids stuff up the toilet. And whenever they bring their plumber, the plumber shows, look, you see all the tissues, and we've been giving our kids over the head and telling them stop putting too many tissues. No more tissues in the toilet. Put everything in the garbage. Couldn't figure out what's going on. And last month, I had a new plumber come to our house, and he looked, and he says, it has nothing to do with your kids putting tissues in the toilet. In fact, you could see there's very little of that. He showed us that there's a big tree that's clogging up all our pipes. And he says, unless you get rid of this tree, you're going to need a plumber to come here every month or two, because there's just lots of roots that are going to keep clogging up your pipes. And spiritually speaking, I think, for whatever reason, maybe certain behaviors, whatever it might be, there are certain things that clog up our system, clog up our channels, our pipes, and they prevent the flow of that spiritual blessing to materialize in our lives. That's the way God made this world, and we have to obviously do things that will open up those channels. So we discussed, yes, we could pray more often. We should, in fact, be praying 3 times a day, is the Jewish way. We can do whatever it takes to earn a living. But, some people might be going out of their way and earning more money, but what does that more money help them if they have to spend it on doctor's bills or higher electric bills or more plumbing or whatever it might be? They're really not achieving much more than the person who's not earning as much as them. It's just that they're earning more and having to spend more. So what at the end of the day do they really, truly achieve? We want to ensure that those channels, the pipeline for our blessings, are open wide and clear. So we said that when a blessing comes from a place that is beyond the whole system, then it flows rapidly. It skips the whole line. There's no risk of it getting delayed or stuck along the way. And that's a profound idea that comes from the blessings of the Kohanim. And of course, as we said previously, we all have that ability to emulate the ways of the Kohanim. But the Kohanim have a certain ability from above to bless. That's the way God made them. Just think about it. By nature, decisions that are made based on logic are difficult to discuss, are very different than decisions made on emotions. I don't want to, I do a lot of counseling. It's part of what I do. And without going into any details, I remember a while ago, I was discussing with a particular family about, Shiva. And I said, I recommend you do the Shiva, the prayers at Shul. Why at Shul? Because at Shul, first of all, I don't have since the Lieberman family left us, they had nothing against our Shul, but our Shul suffered as a result of it because we used to have Rabbi Lieberman here. So Rabbi Lieberman could be at the Shul, and I could go to run prayers in somebody's home. Besides the point, so I don't have an associate rabbi. I don't have Bachram to fill in for me. And COVID times, it's not recommended that we be congregating in people's homes where it's a more confined space. So we're better off doing it at the Shul, where if the weather's fine, we could have it outside. And if the weather's not so fine, even inside, at least it's more spacious. We could socially distance. A couple of weeks back, we had prayers in somebody's house, and then just a few days later, I heard that the host tested positive for COVID. We got to be careful with these things, really. So the thing is that when I was talking to the mourners, one of the mourners says, no, but this is our parents' house. We have to do it here. It was an emotional matter. It wasn't logical. Logical decisions are measured. They're calculated. Emotional decisions are more fluid. It didn't work. And so when we think about, when you shop for basic household goods, figure out what we need, how much of it we need, where we can get it at the best price, go take a lot to Amazon, whatever it might be, right? We buy the right amount of whatever it is we need, okay? My wife says we need to get more, laundry detergent, right? Whatever it is, and we get the amount we need. We're not a commercial dry cleaners. We don't need to get large quantities that are going to go to waste. And of course, You're buying a gift for somebody, right? Child, a friend, grandchild. It's, again, a different process. It's not about getting exactly the right amount at exactly the right price. It's not even about whether the recipient really needs a gift. The gift is about the love that it expresses, the joy in the eyes of the person we're giving it to. So you're not using the same measured way, the same calculated system that we're using to do our own home purchases. It's a different logic, right? If it expresses your love more, then you buy it. The Gemara says every giver gives generously. That's what the Talmud says. Why? Because a gift is not given out of necessity. It's the joy, the pleasure, the love. Right? Take, for example, a philanthropist. Typically, when someone's approached for funds, they want to see, show me the brochure, show me your organization's activities. What do you do? And they might want to see the organization's books, right? Are you transparent? I want to see what money your activities are going towards. Trust me, I got to do fundraising for a Chabad seniors programs, and all the time I hear this. What's your overhead? And some people get very particular. Why do you spend on that? And then the donor might try to figure out how much he values the organization and how much he can afford to give and might give according to that. And that's one type of donor I come across. But then there are times when you talk to a particular donor and they're in a particularly good mood, whatever it might be, right? Maybe it's Purim and they're sitting around enjoying the Purim festivities and they know that on Purim you're supposed to be more generous. So maybe the giving is not so measured and calculated. They're just giving out of the happiness of their heart. And this, Chassidus explains, is the difference between a standard blessing and a priestly blessing. A standard blessing is rooted in the regular state of Ishtalshalus. It's this divine logic. Do you deserve it? Right? Are you really entitled to this blessing in your life? But when a blessing is, that's a blessing on merits, right? It's based on what you deserve. But there's a higher place which transcends the Seder Ishtalshalus. And this is a place that's much deeper. It's a place coming from divine joy, of love. When blessings are given from this great place, from this level, there's no limits. These blessings are much greater. And that's the type of blessing that we discuss here, the blessings of the Kohanim. They come with speed. But not only is it the speed, there's much more than the speed. It is a blessing that is coming from, that's bypassing the usual process, like a gift, like when there's a philanthropist or a person's giving out of the joy of their heart. That's the kind of a blessing that we want God to shower us with in our lives. And perhaps this is another angle to understand why the almonds was the emblem of the priesthood that we were discussing yesterday. Almonds are quick, right? We read Rashi. Rashi said they represent the fact that the punishment for challenging the priesthood of Aaron, God's designation of Aaron and Moshe, that it comes quickly. But almonds also represent something much deeper. They speak to the core of what priesthood is, why it's so valuable, why it's cherished, why it's important, why we have Kohanim, Levim, Israelim. The priesthood is the channel for that abundance of blessing that we get. And without getting clogged up on the way in the system. So to sum up what we've learned so far, we explained, like almonds, that the priestly blessings are, they cause those blessings to materialize, to come quickly in our lives, right? Ordinarily, there's a process by which we receive our sustenance in this world. First, there's the allocation that God decides in the high holidays. Right? Then in the course of the year, we have to work the system. We have to pray. We have to work. We have to do whatever it takes to bring the blessings from the spiritual into the physical into our lives. And then finally, the blessing materializes. Please God, we have good health and sustenance, right? We're working the rules of nature. And the rules of nature require the combination of the spiritual prayers as well as finding a way to earn that income. right? Going to a doctor for checkups to be healthy. We make informed, responsible decisions. We live in the real world. So what does this all mean for us? How do we have to conclude today's shir. And one of the things I think we could learn from this is to remember how sustenance works. And it's true, we've got to work for our money, but we have to remember that the whole act of working for our money is nothing more than a vessel, nothing more than basically getting in line to receive our divine blessing. There's no need for us to get carried away in our various money-making schemes. Remember when hand washing became a thing? I personally, in my family, we always did it. My parents were super sensitive about germs and all that always. But as much as we're washing our hands more and sanitizing, we have to remember not only to wash our hands, but to remember in whose hands we're in. Ultimately, our success is determined only by Hashem. It's not our cleverness or our sharp business acumen that wins us the big bucks. It's pointless then to invest all our efforts into all of our business dealings or to be worry endlessly about how things are going to be and to be nervous if things are going to go wrong or about all the things that, people all the time worried about. That's like trying to create more light in a lamp by letting more powerful light bulbs, you get more powerful light bulbs, but neglecting to plug the lamp into the wall. We have to remember where the blessings really come from. Just like in order for my lights to work, they have to be connected to the electricity. Each of us as well has to be connected to the source of our blessings. And I think that is the message we all have to take from this. So yes, of course, we have to work through nature and we have to pray in order to bring the blessings into our life. But this we also have to understand that, when people used to come to the Rebbe for a bracha, for health, for parnasa, for livelihood, for a shidduch, whatever it was, the Rebbe's blessing was very often accompanied with encouragement. The Rebbe would say, not only give them chizuk, encouragement that whatever needs they have should materialize, but the Rebbe would also encourage them to increase in another mitzvah. Why? Because yes, as much as we have to do the physical plans to make that blessing come into this world, we also have to do what it takes spiritually, right? So a person may have asked for health, and the Rebbe would answer that he should, yes, do whatever it takes to look after their health, but also tell a man to put on tefillin. The Rebbe would tell people they should check their mezuzahs or ensure that they have mezuzahs on their doors, right? People needed a bracha for a shidduch. The Rebbe would say, increase your avas yisrael, your love for a fellow human being. Each person, there was the physical thing you have to do, but there's also the spiritual element to make that blessing materialize in their lives. Learning, studying, it was very important that people did the spiritual connection too. Now you might ask, what does tefillin and mezuzah have to do with earning a livelihood, right? What does keeping kosher, keeping the laws of family purity have to do with having children? And the answer, of course, based on what we've been discussing, is that the mitzvahs are a crucial part of this process by which God's blessings make their way into our physical lives. So, of course, there's definitely a strong connection between the spiritual and the physical. And I think that has to be our approach in life in general. When it comes to money, we often get stressed, no doubt about it. There's a lot that stresses us in life, and money matters is high up there, right? We sometimes feel like we're over our heads, right? We worry. We start thinking, what's going to be? What's going to happen? No doubt this past year, I know at least for me, there were a lot of scares and worries. And sometimes it gets to a point where we could do little else. We're just focusing on more work. And in my industry, maybe it's more fundraising. We're hitting more brick walls and we don't know what we're going to do. And the stress starts to take a toll on our spirituality. And our relationships begin to suffer. And sometimes it's our kids, our loved ones who are affected in the worst way. But this stress, right, this obsession that if only I did this or that, my fortune will change. That's a ploy of the Yetzer Hara, of our evil inclination, who tries to make us forget the true source of our blessing. And this is the point that I think we have to emphasize in our lives. That our job, our real job, is to be one step ahead of that trap. The trap is very easy to fall into. And when we fall into it, it takes over a significant portion of our lives. But we have the ability to remember that such an obsession over how am I going to cover the bills? Yes, we have to worry about that. It's not going to, we can't just rely on miracles, but it's exactly the opposite of what the Torah teaches us. According to the Torah, we have to devote time to work on our business, absolutely. But when we consider the true source of our blessings, we realize how important it is also to set aside time every single day for our spiritual matters. In fact, we have to prioritize it. It's so important, as we do here, thank God, to study Torah and to make sure we designate time for prayer and for all the other aspects and elements of what it means to be a Jew and to live a Jewish life. Shabbos should not be forgotten and put on the back burner. We realize that what's really important is to firmly uphold our values and focus on the important things in life. And so from this perspective, the idea of God forbid, a person sacrificing honesty because they think they'll make an extra buck that way, right? Or to forget about our spouse and our children and our siblings and our family and our friends and all the other important people because I'm focused on my job, on my work. That's just silly. Instead, the Torah teaches us work on the foundations, right? It may seem to go against the grains of modern day life. But as Jews, we know that we don't need to chase after the little things. We can and we must focus on the big things. And that's why it's important that our Yiddishkeit, that our spirituality should be a high priority. Our foundations are exactly that. That's why Shabbos is so important. Think about the material blessings. We spent so many lessons 10 months ago learning about Shabbos, about the benefit of time spent with family, about the aspects of the Jewish spirit, about preventing the burnout. And so, my friends, that's the message I want to say. We have to focus and remember where our blessings come from. And these foundations will lead not only to a robust spiritual life, but to a happy, meaningful physical life for us, for our families, for our friends, for all the people we know. So I want to wish us all the very best success in achieving these blessings. And so, like the almonds that we discussed yesterday, the idea that the priestly blessings work quickly, rapidly. And we have to remember in our lives where our blessings come from and focus on that. Any questions before we go?
Please, Rabbi, may I ask a question? It's Roslyn.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
Yes, Roslyn.
When I was in Israel, I was in a shul and I sat next to a Sfardi Rebbetzin, and it was duchening, and she said to me, open your hands and make a kli for the brachas that these kohanim are giving you. Now, is this just a Sfardi minhag?
It certainly is a Sephardi minhag. I oftentimes see, even in shul, Sephardim tend to be like more of a physical aspect, of like when we say Potech et yadecha maspilach charatzon, that God opens his hands, and God doesn't have literal hands. We're saying, it's anthropomorphic language where we apply physical attributes to a spiritual being, to God. But I think it's a Sephardic thing to actually do that. And it's nice to see that. It's not necessarily everyone's custom, but it's certainly a nice way to actually demonstrate that we want the blessings to come into our life. In Chabad tradition, we keep our matzahs on Pesach in the concave position, like also, and because we say that the three matzahs, top one is representing the Kohanim, middle one the Leviim, bottom one Yisraelim. It spells the word Kli. And we put them this way, concave, that we want to create a receptacle for the blessings in our life. Lots of other symbolisms, like overflowing our cups at Kiddush. Why do we overflow the Becher at Kiddush? Because we want the blessings to be overflowing and abundant in our lives.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you.
Looking forward to another shir tomorrow. If anyone
a lot of extra time.
Chodesh Tov.
No worries. And if you have a particular topic you want me to discuss tomorrow, let me know. Otherwise, I will certainly try to think, see what we get to learn today and share with you, please God, tomorrow at tomorrow's share. For now, Sei gesund, have a wonderful day, and look forward to seeing you.